Good morning and welcome back to the Grande Prairie and District Chamber of Commerce Community Pulse Series. My name is Cord Spiro and I'm the second vice chair of the chamber. We're meeting on Treaty 8 territory and we are honored and acknowledged all of the First Nations, Métis and Inuit people who have lived, traveled and gathered on these lands for thousands of years. As you've seen, this session is being recorded. You'll be able to ask questions in the chat box or by using the raise hand function and unmuting. The Grande Prairie area has a robust and diverse economy. The Community Pulse Series is designed to provide updates and insights from a variety of industry sectors and organizations that make up the fabric of our unique and incredible community. Thank you to our presenting partners, Aquatera Utilities, Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, City of Grande Prairie Regional Innovation Network, and our supporting partners, Community Futures Grande Prairie and Regional County of Grande Prairie and Municipal District of Greenview. Today we are highlighting presenting partners, the City of Grande Prairie. Please welcome Business Retention and Expansion Coordinator, Cindy Patton. Take it away, Cindy.
Hi, everyone. As Cord mentioned, my name is Cindy Patton. I'm the Business Retention and Expansion Coordinator with Invest Grande Prairie. So with the weather warming up and springtime construction is upon us, I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about some of the grants that we have that you can take advantage of. We have a beautification and patio grant for any facade improvement, landscaping, or patio project that improves the aesthetic appeal, pedestrian access, and safety. We have awarded funding to 24 applicants, and of those, we now have 13 new patios in the city. This grant is available until funding runs out. The next one we have is the Business Revitalization Grant. This applies to a commercial or industrial property for either exterior building and property improvements or demolition or removal of a building. We have awarded funding to 8 applicants since the program opened in July of 2021. The deadline for this application is December 30th, 2022. We also have a residential infill, and this is for new construction or reconstruction of a single detached dwelling, duplex, or multi-attached dwelling within the eligible residential infill area, that's a mouthful, with a minimum construction value of $200,000. This is a $15,000 grant per infill lot for new construction or reconstruction projects. The deadline for applications is December 30th, 2022. And lastly, that I'll talk about is the Municipal Fee Rebate, which is a grant equal to 100% of the city imposed portions of all inspection services permit fees, engineering services fees, and planning and development fees to a maximum of $10,000. The municipal fee rebate can be applied to a maximum of 2 projects per builder, and the deadline for applications is December 30th, 2022. Something important to remember for all the grants is that no construction can be performed prior to submitting an application, receiving approval from the review committee, and then signing a reimbursement agreement with the city. These are just a few of the grants that we have available through our department. And for more information, feel free to contact myself, or you can go onto our city website in the Economic Development Department, and you'll find all of our grants under grants and incentives. I'll put a link in the chat as well, so you can check it out. And now back to you, Cord.
Thank you, Cindy. And thanks to the City of Grande Prairie for supporting our Community Pulse series. This week's presenter is Brian Grant, Chief Executive Officer for the Grande Prairie Airport Commission, which operates the Grande Prairie Airport. The Grande Prairie Airport is the largest airport in the Peace Country and is ranked among the busiest regional airports in Canada. The terminal, originally built in 1981, has undergone extensive renovations with increased space, added a restaurant to the 2nd floor, and expanded the terminal to the south and added parking space. Further expansion added another gate, baggage carousel, and more office space. The airport is served by regional air carriers, Air Canada and WestJet, and also sees charter traffic and additional traffic caused by industry in the area. With direct flights to Edmonton and Calgary, the Grande Prairie Airport is a gateway for connections to the rest of the world. Please welcome Brian Grant.
Thank you, Cord, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to engage with us today. I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to share a screen with you here and we'll do a quick. Let's hope this works as good as it did in the practice. There we go. So today I'd just like to give you a bit of a update on where we're at, what the pandemic has done to us in passenger movements, and then a couple of things that we're working on now that that will probably come to light here in the near future when it comes to advocacy. So I'm just going to start off with a little bit of how the airport model works here in Grande Prairie. Of course, the airport was transferred to the city of Grande Prairie from the federal government in February of 1997. And the first year of operation, we worked as a city department. In September of 97, the Grande Prairie Airport Commission was incorporated as a not-for-profit company. And the city of Grande Prairie is the sole shareholder in that agreement and incorporation. The mandate to GPAC was given by the city originally when we started, and it is to develop and operate the airport in support of the economic strategies and priorities of the city and region through our provision of infrastructure and air services to all users. GPAC and the city of Grande Prairie signed a lease, which turned over the operation and development of the airport to the commission, and it was effective in January of 1998 for 20 years. And we've just recently renewed the lease for an additional 20 years as the operator and developer of the airport. So we're in pretty good shape for the next 19 years. And the Grande Prairie Airport Commission is governed by a board of directors, and that's comprised of 2 City of Grande Prairie representatives, usually sitting councilors, and up to 9 public members that are appointed by the City of Grande Prairie. And those appointments are done based on applications that are put forward by members of the public to be considered for a seat on that board. Next, we identify our catchment area. So in our industry, the catchment area is basically the areas from which we draw and know we draw passengers for use of our air services. So you can see here, we go right up to the Northwest Territories border. We go down to Valley View, down into pretty much the Grand Cache area, over into Dawson Creek, and we do pull from the Fort St. John region as well. But Fort St. John is starting to see some better air services now, especially with the larger projects that are happening, such as the Site C Dam. However, we still draw from there. So our main competitor in the process is usually Fort St. John. That's where we look to make sure that we're aligned with the costs and the operations in the region. And we work pretty closely also with those in the north and high level Peace River. We are seeing more and more come from the Northwest Territories. Now that COVID is almost behind us, we're seeing more of that return in our retail sector, and then it spills over into the airport use as well. This is a bit of a recovery update. It's a little bit busy on the screen for you, I realize, but it kind of gives us an idea of where we went throughout the last 2 years. The blue bars represent where we were prior to the COVID pandemic, which was in 2019. You can see we were averaging right around 35,000 passengers every month. And so we count our passengers both incoming and outgoing, so in-planed and deplaned, we refer to. In 2020, you can see that we had still very significant stable traffic until the hit came in March, and we started to see the restrictions placed on nearly everything. And then you can see the effect as it bottomed out in April of 2020 and came back slightly in August after, I believe, the second wave, and kind of stayed stagnant for that last half of that period. And then in 2021, it stayed pretty flat until we started to see the July-August run, and then it just kind of kept climbing from there. And then the yellow bar shows kind of where we are now. It's been a slow recovery, but we are certainly starting to see strong numbers. March and April. May looks like it's going to climb over into nearly the 20,000 mark. So we'll be well over a 50% recovery rate, certainly by June or July. So things are coming back. It's a bit slow. I think in our opinion, some of the return of passengers were slightly limited because of the seat capacity that we had here. The airlines were a bit slow in responding, but we've got our first multi-month schedule in 2 years now, which to us is wonderful. We were working day to day and week to week for the last 18 to 20 months. And so to actually see a picture that's going to take us into the fall certainly has given us a bit more ability to plan. Now, our flights, we're going to show you the flights that we actually had in August 2019 and where they will be in August of 2022 now that we've seen a summer schedule. Grande Prairie to Edmonton in 2019, we had 26 flights weekly. So that was 26 turns. We say weekly because some days are served maybe twice and some days are served once. So we count the total number per week. In 2022, we will see 14 flights a week. And we'll talk a little bit more about Edmonton and its market later on. In Grande Prairie to Calgary, we had 54 times weekly in 2019. And by the time we get to August of this year, we should be equal. So our capacity levels to Calgary will increase to our pre-COVID numbers, which is good for connections and it's good for ability to get out multiple times of the day. Then we do another comparison as we watch ourselves grow, and in this case, as we watch ourselves recover. And this is an August to August seat capacity. So this is telling us the number of seats, not the number of flights that we had in any given period. So you can see here in 2019, we were seeing just over 61,000 seats coming and going into our airport in the month of August. In 2020, you can see that it dropped down and we ended up being closer to about 18,000 seats in a month. And then you start to see a bit of an increase back again in 2021. And then in 2022, the schedule would show us in August having around 51,000 seats. So you can see the airlines are now starting to respond to the recovery in our area, recovery in the economy, and their belief in the recovery of what will happen with the passengers. Any questions in that first part? Okay, we'll move on. I'm going to give you a little bit of information. One of the things that's been discussed and we've been working on through the quieter periods is custom services in Grande Prairie. We're seeing some interest for ultra low cost carriers such as Flair to potentially provide us with winter sunspot destination service. But the biggest crippling effect for ourselves and many other airports in a regional capacity is we have no custom services. Initially, we did have some custom services. It was launched here in 2010 for the Arctic Winter Games. Our building, as it expanded, was configured so that we're able to split off a part of the building to use as an international arrival. So that was first tested in 2010. The federal government at that time covered all the costs associated with that temporary 2-week service. And you may recall that Sunwing Airlines launched some seasonal service to Puerto Vallarta in 2012, 2013, but they did their custom services with a one-stop clearance service at Fort McMurray, which turned out to be somewhat of a nightmare for everybody in Grande Prairie. Then again, they launched the next season and tried Cancun in 14-15 against with the customs clearance stop at Fort McMurray. And feedback from the community, including those of my staff that took those trips, said it was less than desirable to use that format. Right now, we have a proposal on the table from Flair Airlines to do a once a week winter destination, December through March, over a multi-year period. So they're not indicating, let's just try this market. Let's try to dedicate to a multi-year deal and see if we can't build a market, because it is going to be to a brand new destination. 5 airports were included as our competitors within our regions, including ourselves, Fort McMurray, Lethbridge, Prince George, and then a bit of an oddity in Windsor, Ontario. None of the Alberta airports that are working in this proposal have designated ports of entry, which means full-time customs services. And we'd be required to pay for border services, agency services on a per flight basis. I'm giving this information just so hopefully the community understands the costs involved in trying to get these types of services into place. None of us have had to date customs services commitments for the airports, and so we have not been able to come to an agreement to sign, awaiting some decision from Canada Customs Services on if and when they could supply the service. They are severely understaffed at this point, and timing is not the greatest to come this year, but we are working together and they are doing what they can to give us some information. The Tucson Regional Airport is one of the possible destinations. Nothing, again, I'd like to identify here has been signed. So certainly this is only an example. But that is one airport that contracted a consulting service to lobby the government on behalf of service proposals that they would have in the queue. There's a couple of options that we have seen through this process that may work in a service like this to Grande Prairie. Obviously, the best one would be to have individual service at each airport for clearing the passengers. Now, in saying that, the challenge for us is that any service is usually by an ultra low cost carrier once or twice a week. So it's not a service that's 5 days a week that CBSA would be able to send some people into and keep working. It would involve travel every week, either once or twice a week. So it's not a very convenient supply of service for them, which increases the cost dramatically to us as we have to pay as an airport for the services. So the estimated services from another location could be considered, but what the current suggestion from us is that we would see the agents for Canada Customs either coming into Grande Prairie from Edmonton or Calgary. They'd be flown in, not on the same aircraft because that's not permitted, and it would cost us approximately $20,000 per flight landed by Flair here in Grande Prairie. So the cost is significant and would have to be bared by the airport in order for it to be considered a cost-effective and efficient service that could keep the airfares in check. Total cost for an airport such as ours on a once-a-week service flight, i.e. on a Friday, would be in excess of $320,000 for the 4-month season. So those are some of the numbers that we're wrestling with in looking at those types of services versus the services that are available through, say, Air Canada and WestJet, where you start here and then you clear customs in Calgary and continue on. Option number 2, which is being worked on not only by us, but the airports involved in the United States, is to have an agreement between Canada and the US where their border services protection would do the clearances at that end of that airport before coming to Canada, similar to what we see when we go to Edmonton or Calgary and we do pre-clearance for the US when we go out to the United States. Now, there is an agreement in place. It would give us significant cost savings to all airports because obviously it's being served from one airport daily. There are bilateral agreements. You see the service of pre-clearance in Edmonton, Calgary, at the other international airports for US arrivals, but Canada has never exercised their rights in these bilateral agreements to have that same service provided in the US to come home to Canada. this option would require federal action to request formally with the United States their enactment of their part of the bilateral agreement. And we're getting estimates of 2 years out because, you know, governments grind slowly. So it's not an instant option for us at this point. We have made recommendations for lobbying for such a service, and it's to engage the entire region to find support for custom services right here at Grande Prairie for direct from Grande Prairie flights, the $20,000 I referenced per flight. And we're looking at hopefully some type of lobbying that maybe the provincial government would become involved in for the economic development and quality of life in our region. And then working together with the others in Alberta that are facing the same situation to put some pressure on other levels of government to assist in bringing these services to all communities involved. And then we are also actively right now seeking Member of Parliament support for all regions in Alberta to try to drive home to the federal government that perhaps the Canada Border Services Agency should review their cost of cost recovery at airports such as ourselves. Any questions on that process and what we're facing? I'm really interested in hearing people's thoughts on winter service, direct service from Grande Prairie, even though it's a once a week service. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Looks like Wendy has a question for you, Brian.
Hi, Brian. I guess option two is really the only option at this point, but my question to you is there a possibility that you can train your current staff to be CBSA officials and then manipulate the staffing profiles for that day a week of service?
No, there doesn't seem to be a mechanism for that in the Customs Act. The second thing that's been brought to our attention is they are heavily regulated and heavily unionized. And so the training of people outside of the customs sector in the agency would not be permitted. And we've been hearing that for a number of years, and it's just a flat, we're the entity in control and we will have the officers. There's significant training in everything, even outside of just this simple process that we're doing, that they have to meet to be considered a certified customs agent. So we've been told, no, you'd be looking at a fly-in or a staffing from ourselves.
Is that an option for advocacy? You know, whether it's option two or training?
Personally, in the responses we've gotten over the years, I don't think it's an option for advocacy because of the many factors that come into play, both politically, federal control, and unionization of the staff. I think our advocacy point with more success would be to have the costs covered and simply bring them here.
Okay.
As far as, is this an issue with other smaller airports across the country? You mentioned, you know, the other two in Alberta, Lethbridge, Fort Mac. Is this enough of an issue with other smaller airports in Canada that you know, that it, you know, maybe might be able to get somebody's attention about this and try and figure out a workable solution?
It is at a lot of airports. Only certain airports are designated ports of entry. And when the Customs and Border Services Act came into play back in the 90s, that's when they switched to a grandfathered set of services, and then anybody else that comes into play would be by cost recovery. Many airports and regional airports, especially with the ultra low cost new entrants in the market, are probably potential service areas for these types of aircraft operations, but without the customs services being identified as available, most of them get passed up. They don't even get to the starting stage. We happened to get approached here because they knew the layout of our facility and that we could accomplish it. But there's places I've talked to Sudbury, other colleagues across the country, Terrace, Kitimat. So there's pretty well every regional airport that say moves over 200,000 passengers would likely be a candidate if there was a solution to being able to say, come to us and we have the services available to take you in.
And what are the major advantages of having a service like that available, you know, as opposed to having to rely on the large airports, just for maybe for people just to kind of give them an idea of why this is would be such an important service?
It's changed somewhat since the pandemic, but there's now two basic issues. Number one is that the air carriers that are currently here will offer services through their travel agencies and direct booking to reduce the cost of the fare from Grande Prairie to the first major point, which would be Calgary, Edmonton, that has pre-clearance. So we refer to that in the industry as a tag-on fee. So they will give you a cost on a flight to international destinations or transborder. And then when you take that flight, they will actually make that flight on the tag portion between Grande Prairie and Calgary or Edmonton less than what you'd normally pay just to go to those locations. So when they do that, that now kind of squeezes the price tags and the availability for market space to the new entrants. So number one is if we had the service here, it has to be cost effective, which means the community, region, or the airport has to pay in order to keep that ability there for us and make it competitive. And number two is the business model of the ultra low cost carriers such as a Flair or a Lynx is direct point-to-point service with no costs in between. Most of these proposals that are floating around now are to some random destinations, not necessarily destinations that we all would consider going to all the time, like a Vegas, a Phoenix, an LA, but they search out airports that will give them a lot in return. So they'll give them free access to their facilities. They may even give them revenue guarantees to start a service. So they're looking for those different markets and different types of markets. So getting the custom services at this end gives them the ability to look at a number of different locations, which is cheap. One of the three air carriers that I talked to about proposals had indicated maybe they do a one-off stop at another airport, but they didn't really like the option of a Calgary or Edmonton because they're very expensive. But the rest of them solely indicated we want to make direct service. That's what sells the service to the communities, we believe, but that's what also keeps our costs at a minimum.
Okay, and I guess we're going to find out about Flair Airlines here in the next few weeks, whether they're going to get the go-ahead to continue flying.
I have had some discussions with them because we were looking at some various options. They, for what it's worth, they indicate that they're very, very confident that they are meeting the CTA concerns. Everything they indicate is that they've met all but the extension of the financing requirement for the 18 months they're requesting, but they've indicated in-house that all the rest seem to be put to bed.
Excellent. Okay, I'll let you continue your presentation here and then we'll get back into questions.
Okay, the second part of the equation that we're working on also includes customs at this time, and it comes up when we talk about freight and cargo. Here at the airport, we do hear comments about, you know, we should have custom services here to clear packages. We should have custom services here to ship, and it would make a significant improvement to the abilities of the regions and the business in the area. So in taking that, we have made attempts in the past to try to determine exactly what the usage would be, or at least a hard estimate to build a business case. Air cargo currently from our airport is restricted to whatever capacity there is in the passenger carrying aircraft. So freight usually takes second fiddle to a full load of passengers. Because of the way the aircraft is configured, the weight balance ratio, the money is in passengers here, where in some other locations, like going north in a combination unit, cargo has an equal ability to generate revenue. The current aircraft that fly to Grande Prairie, the Q400s, do have limited dimensional size of 26 by 20 packages and a maximum weight of 150 pounds. So it's very limited, we realize, in the ability for certain packages to get through. On average, right now, the two carriers together report to us that they move about 8 packages per day, and that's over the course of 5 flights. So they have 5 flights to choose from, and there's about 8 packages a day, which is considered to be relatively non-existent. And by comparison, an estimated air cargo aircraft in what we refer to as a narrow body, so like a 737, which WestJet and Air Canada started to convert when they realized the pandemic cargo industry was really taking off. That type of an aircraft once a week would be able to move about 146,000 pounds of freight. So we would have to have a significant business case to bring one of those aircraft to Grande Prairie for cargo, much less the customs services that may be triggered by such a cargo movement. The most comprehensive study in cargo demand for customs was done in 2010, 2012 by the County of Grande Prairie, and you may recall they invested in the potential of a multimodal logistics park. That project included potential customs services for both air cargo and ground freight. So we worked with the county at that time to try to identify what the cargo demand that would require customs would be for pretty well all types of freight that came to Grande Prairie. Unfortunately, with the departure of Walter Peskowski at the time that was leading that project, the results were never completed and were never released to us to see how we compared with the whole overall picture for customs services and direct cargo. We again addressed this issue in 2014 and 2018, where we engage with consultants, and they do a master plan for us, which helps us lay the groundwork for the next 20 years of service and infrastructure improvements as we estimate what the economic growth and the populations of the region would generate. So we did one in 2014. We usually try to do one at least once every 5 years. It includes stakeholder consultation, and in this particular case, in the last two, they attempted to seek consultations from the business community on what potential was out there that we may not be hearing about. The conclusions in both studies were that the demand for air cargo services was not sufficient for consideration in a 20-year vision, and that included customs as well. They didn't believe that there was enough for cargo, and cargo would have to be built before we can make a business case for customs services in that field. The reality that we came to in both of those studies was that the Edmonton International Airport to date now has received a significant air cargo infrastructure and a lot of logistics development in the past 10 years. There's billions of dollars that went into that process. And Edmonton has become pretty much the cargo hub of Alberta. Calgary has a lot of facilities, but Edmonton has really been successful in moving away from some passenger connections because of things out of their control and getting into the cargo business. Ground transportation links to our region provide delivery timelines in a really consistent fashion and normally on a 24/7 basis. So what we're seeing right now in the Edmonton distribution center and cargoes and customs clearance is there's multiple carriers with wide body aircraft coming into one facility, and they have one set of customs agents. And that makes the business case for direct services and customs here very difficult. When they do their study, They look at what services are available for air cargo when it comes to the carriers, and customs also looks at it as well and says, what's reasonable, what do we feel would be achievable if we were to put these services directly into another regional airport. And so that's a large that's a large wall for us to get through. So the historical efforts to demonstrate the demand for service for potential air carriers to see if there's interest in even a small aircraft to start moving more freight is considered insufficient to develop anything and support further action in our region at this time, especially by the airport. A regional partnership of government and business needs to engage, in our opinion, with a reputable consultant that is experienced in air cargo and customs, so that they can look at the multimodal freight requirements in cargo and the best approach of approaching customs in that respect. There just simply isn't enough data out there in the community. There isn't enough data that's coming from just-in-time manufacturers or producers. There's been talk of the agricultural industry and agribusiness, oil patch having difficulties getting packages through and here on time. But we really do have to figure out a way for the community and region to come together and quantify what may be here before we could make any further steps or proposals. I just will add to that we have tried to prepare now again for another update to our master plan. So we're going to engage in one this year. It will include some questions about cargo again, but it's not going to look much different in my opinion. So advocacy has to come from within the region and the business community together to help us show a case for that. Any questions on the customs cargo issues?
I think Wendy has her hand up again.
Hi, thanks, Tom. Would you have some sort of form letter or form document that we could blast out, whether it's through the chamber or myself through the business association, city and county, that we could compile that list easier for you than just finding needles in the haystack?
Yes, certainly. I met with and did this presentation, a similar one, to the mayors and reeves of the region about a week ago, and indicated that if the mayors and reeves and businesses and CFCs of the region wanted to get together, we would supply something for the passenger side of the issue first, to see if we could get the attention of customs and border services and the government. So we'll be putting one together, and we can certainly send it out. We're planning to send it to each of the regions, municipal governments, but we can certainly bring it to the chamber as well. So we'll probably see something coming out within the next week.
And
it will be a form letter.
Yeah, will you have one that is also for packages, if there would be use by businesses?
At this time, we wouldn't have one here at the airport. We really believe that there needs to be, and maybe it's the chamber, I'm not sure what the right mechanism is. We really believe that there has to be some quantifying of what's here first. We've repeatedly talked about this over the last number of years, and we've never really been able to establish the quantity, so we had a business case. So we could do something, but I would suggest the region or the chamber puts that together for that information, unless we can come together and get the information, and then the airport certainly would be welcome to or would be willing to participate and try to drive the initiative forward.
Okay, I think just the fact of reaching out to the region through the municipalities and then the chamber, and the little bit that I can do here, but that might be easier than people coming after the fact. If we put something out, people should answer it typically.
Yes, and that's what we're hoping by sending it to the regional municipalities is that they would at least start to engage the province, and it would work from there. Hopefully it would work out. I did have a discussion, and there was a few on our last presentation that indicated that they are experiencing problems with customs clearances to get parts here. So we did go to the director level of Customs and Border Services in Alberta, and interestingly enough, she said, we don't hear or see issues when it comes to clearance of items that are coming into Canada. Their process in Edmonton is basically, once it gets into their control, when it lands at the airport in Edmonton, the process for them is between 2 and 3 hours at the most to clear any items that are a normal package or situation that wouldn't be suspect. If it is stuff like foods, agri-foods, that kind of thing, then she said public health may get involved, and that's where it becomes an issue and it's out of the control of Canada Border Services. So how fast those departments respond can then maybe hold up some packages. But she said, by and large, in their experience in the cargo clearance at customs, is the brokerage. It's the firm that the customer chooses to broker the access of the goods from other countries. And she said the first step they usually have is to encourage people to look at the broker they use, and if their services seem slow, they should really look at their alternatives for brokers, which was interesting. That hadn't been brought to our attention before. She did indicate if there was individual repeated issues that were happening, her door was open. And so I'm saying if there are that the industry know about there, we're more than happy to take them in and direct them to her for an answer. But her suggestion was most importers should really look at the brokerage system and services that they use as the first issue.
Oh,
If
Tracy
there's
has,
no question.
Brian, Tracy has a question, looks like.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian, for the presentation. Certainly informative. Quick question. I apologize if I missed it. In the beginning, you spoke about the flights between here and Edmonton and Calgary. And Calgary was going to be pre-COVID, but Edmonton was not. Could you talk about that?
The Edmonton market has been a struggle for us at the airport and for the region for well before COVID. In the last 5 years especially, it's been hard for us to entice the airlines, new ones to come in. We had a couple of smaller ones, Central Mountain Air, Northwestern Air Lease, that came in and give it a try. The main two carriers over 5 years ago presented to the airport their main strategy going forward, and that was that there's two large international airports in Alberta, but they would favor one over the other in the future to reduce costs and to improve the connectability on the system. So basically what they're doing is they're focusing more on Calgary because they can then build a larger bank of flights and services for connections to other locations. So they aim to try to have you in a connection at an international airport like Calgary to line up within 2 hours. Since COVID, no doubt it can be 8, 10, whatever it is. But that's the premise of how they operate, is that they want to be able to give you the most options for connections in the least amount of time and only have to do it at one location. Now, we'll talk about Edmonton. Edmonton, in that case, over that time, has lost a lot of their service when it comes to connections. They still have a big catchment area of 1 million, probably 1 million passengers, but they're not getting the attention that Calgary is because they're considered to be serving their market, not so much the hub of connections of the whole network. For us, it's important to try to get early day flights and late afternoon flights for business, and also for connection to whatever's there in the bank going east and west. Edmonton over the past 3 years, the utilization of that route, even if it was timed, is very poor. We know that there's a lot of people driving because it's not convenient or efficient to fly to Edmonton. But the fact of the matter is, when we did put aircraft on and had success getting them in the past, the utilization simply wasn't there to carry that load. A load factor for a flight that's considered to be successful is about a 70% seat fill each time. And Edmonton can run it consistently 20 to 30 people. So the two main carriers have pretty much written it off. But we are now looking at a different alternative for business travel. And that is to find one of those smaller tier 3 carriers that can come to Grande Prairie and service on a daily basis, but not to the international airport in its terminal building, to a fixed base operator like a hangar business or a refueling business, so that you would skip the requirement for passenger screening at both ends. So in our industry, it's referred to as a dirty flight, but essentially it would get us out of the link of having to go through PBS or passenger screening services. So it would save probably an hour and a half on each end of a flight. And then they land at a fixed base operator, and those hangars have services very complementary now to what they used to, where they have rental cars there, they have taxi there, they have a passenger lounge. So it's like landing at an airport with the amenities at a terminal building, but it negates the issue of having to go through all the other processes. So we are working actively on that now. We did come close last summer with Central Mountain Air. I'll give you an example, not to bash just one carrier here, but Central Mountain Air came in, decided they'd go to the terminal and give it a try. WestJet had indicated that we were months away from service back to Edmonton. And then within 2 weeks of CMA launching, WestJet threw a flight onto Edmonton, and out went the little guy. And now we have one flight to Edmonton from WestJet at 5 o'clock at night, which is not any good to any business traveler. So I guess it is for us, it's a challenge to make Edmonton work. So we're kind of now looking at trying to make Edmonton work for the businessman or the traveler, and make sure that we give them the best option with the least amount of hassle, and hopefully we can build from there. But when it comes to connections going east and west or out of the country, simply Calgary is their preference, and it offers the better system to handle customs. One thing I would just add is if the chamber was able to poll and give us some numbers of the support for Edmonton service, or the issues they find and why they don't support it when it's here, it would be of tremendous help to us in trying to do something with the Edmonton service. It's, we always say we know there's passengers to go there. We don't do ticket pulls. They used to be able to do ticket pulls, which would identify postal codes and where people come from and where people go. The last one we did was about 3 years ago. They cost a significant amount of money, but we did one, and it indicated that basically at that time, only 18% of the traffic that was flying to Edmonton on a flight was staying in Edmonton. The rest were connecting to another point of travel, which then instantly identified by the carriers that, hey, we can do that to Calgary. It's only a 5-minute longer flight, and you're going to get more options. So that study certainly didn't do us any favors, although we hoped it would. It actually pointed that the carriers were right in doing what they're doing right now. So.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to argue when, the stats come up like that, and you see that, maybe they're correct in their assumptions. So Tertius has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Brian. And I'm not being biased here, but again, thanks to the Chamber for this incentive with this community pulse. Brian, just a quick question, and of course it boils back to this whole Edmonton thing, because it really hampers a lot of business people to do that quick in and out flight. But also the other issue I see with that is now we kind of in somewhat force people to drive to Edmonton. Of course, then there's that whole safety risk with that as well. I know you are on our radar at the Chamber to come and see, so kind of for preparation for that, we'll definitely try and get some information on the whole Edmonton scenario. One question I have regarding that, do you have any kind of data or stats how, I know obviously COVID had its share, but now post-COVID, people have assumed different ways of communicating and meeting, and obviously that could lead to less flights to Edmonton or Calgary for meetings because now you just Zoom in. Do you guys have any stats on that, how that have affected or potentially will affect numbers? Thank you.
We had a presentation from InterVistas Consulting to the board a month ago, which indicated that they felt worldwide that it would impact business travel, but not more than about 20%. They felt that the working from home affects the local community more, and that people will start to travel again, especially for conferences and especially for multiple joint meetings. So that was their estimate, that they figured that business travel may come back, but it could be 20% less than what we saw pre-pandemic. That's the best answer I can give you because they did the study internationally.
Thank you.
We almost used the hour.
Oh, we're still, and I think we're probably still get a few more questions. So if people are willing and you have the time, I think we can just kind of keep rolling here a little bit. If I know there was,
I'm good.
Sorry, Tom, there was in the chat one, there's one from Leah. I'm not sure if you've seen
yeah,
it.
I saw it. I was kind of waiting to see if Brian still had more of a presentation, and then maybe we can fire a few more questions at him.
We're good. I think just to fire away at whatever questions you have right now.
All right, perfect. Well, as Tertius mentioned, Leah had a question. I guess it comes down to how you've, with your expansion plans, how those are, if those are going to continue or what's in the hopper. But she asked about having an electric vehicle parking or charging station at the airport. And how does that fit into your long range plans?
We have 3 rapid charging stations here now, open to the public. There is one to the side of our building, and there's 2 in the parking lot. They are marked. And we do let them, we provide them for travelers and passengers. So if somebody's coming into Grande Prairie, needs a charge, they can stop here and do that, or passengers can use it as well and park there. So we do have 3 at the moment. We're looking at potential for more. I'm not sure that we've actually been able to advertise it in a region-wide fashion as well as we could. But we've had them in place for, just over a year, I think.
Any other questions from the group? I'll have a couple maybe for Brian too, just as kind of a wind up here. If I don't see any other hands up, maybe Brian, I am curious about the facilities there and what you've done so much, and the place looks just tremendous. And what else, or what other goals do you have for growth at the airport?
I think you'll see now that most of our attention will be given to the terminal building in the next phases of expansion that we do. Obviously, the pandemic has altered all of the projections of when we'll do it. We still have a pre-design layout of the terminal building in 4 phases that would come over the next 20-year period. And the first phases, which we now are looking at launching late this year just for initial design, is what we refer to as phase 1, and that's to expand the area where you check in. So your arrivals area, It is congested. We get more service coming in. We're going to be really tight for a while. So that's the first phase. It'll push out the north wall, give more room for that customer service aspect there. And to add to our secure hold room, so that after you move through the screening process, we're gonna have more seating and more capacity in that area. Those are the first two areas that you'll probably see happen. Right now, it's probably 3 years away from being in the shovels in the ground project, simply because all the projections are lining up now to push it back that far. In 2019, we were just ready to launch for a full design. And then we pulled back. All of our major capital projects have been frozen since the middle of 2020. So as we do this new master plan, it'll reset all of the estimates and all of the timings that we see. Normally, when we do an expansion, it is triggered by what we refer to in the industry as peak capacity demand. So that means the heaviest traffic flow of the day meets a certain number, and that's what triggers this. Not so much that we move 400,000 passengers a day or 500, but that in the part of that day, we're moving 90% of it. So that expands the building. If our flights are all balanced and spread out, then the peak obviously is not nearly as severe. And so we ride that out to try to ensure that it's an efficient move. So peak capacity demand is expected to rise, and it may rise. We were at 450,000 passengers pre-pandemic, but we could end up now with a difference in the way we're served, where all the aircraft are coming in within a 6-hour window. That could drive us further ahead than we expected by the return of passengers.
Quite a juggling act you get to do over there.
Nothing compared to the last 2 years.
What was the biggest challenge for you?
Well, obviously financially it was very tough, but we were stewarded in a pretty good condition. We had requirements, and we kept reserves. So we've actually come out of it financially fairly stable compared to my colleagues in some places that are just ravaged. We didn't have to take on any debt, and our ability to tap into some federal funds for wage subsidy and things held us to a zero. We had deficits, but we had reserves for operations that covered them. Personally, being here over 35 years, it was what it did to our employees, the loss of employees, and the experience of having what we've built up. We had the luxury of building over the last 15 years. We really were in a mode of expansion, construction. To see it all come to an end and have days where we sat in the airport here and there wasn't a single flight, I think probably hurt us more than anything. It hurt the people. It was hard to watch for myself, and we're still working through that. The airport's not that big when it comes to the operations of the airport itself by the Airport Commission. I mean, we're a small 52 member staff, and we lost 60% of those just to try to hang on.
Yeah, I think sometimes we take for granted the human aspect of any business, and that had to be incredibly difficult for you and the team. And well, hopefully we're on the rebound, and hopefully we can get back to some of those pre-COVID numbers. And I mean, it looks like there's a lot of things in the motion in the background, and we wish you well with that. And if there are ways that I think our community can help, can try to help, I'm sure our community and region would be able to jump on board or be willing to jump on board. We do have another question. I don't have a name. I've got Peace River Air Watch, but go ahead, sir.
I didn't have time to change that, but it's Adrian here with Kid Office Plus, and we are stationed Peace River and have a location in Grande Prairie. But just wondering if the airport has reached out to other communities in the north. I know we have an airport in Peace River. It's quite small, but I know that a lot of people utilize the Grande Prairie Airport to commute. And I'm just wondering if you guys had reached out to some northern communities for that support.
Yes, we have. I mentioned that we had the mayors and reeves invite by the city to a presentation a week ago. We have members, I have staff members that sit on PRETA and tourism as well. As far as going to each individual community, we haven't split it and did that, but we're certainly open to it. If we had, for instance, if I had an invitation from the Peace River community or council or whatever, I'd jump on the truck and go there any day and do a presentation and hear what they have to say, high level, anywhere. Our region is very important to us. We realize, and I think a lot of people do, that if we're moving 450,000 passengers in a city of 68,000, that's not what's driving us here. The region, that 280 or 90,000 passengers in our region is what's making this airport a regional hub. So, you know, we're willing and ready to reach out to anybody. But that is a good point. I mean, you know, we could do more that way. And I think a lot of times we just wait for the invitation.
Well, maybe consider it maybe an invitation right there. So I guess maybe we'll just knock down that door and keep working
Absolutely.
together. So yeah, I know, Brian, you like you said, you've been 35 years, and I know you've had so many discussions with you know, around the region and the province and to the west as well. So we wish you the best, and I'll let Cord maybe wrap things up here, and we'll let people get on their way.
Yeah, thanks again, Brian. That was really insightful. Great stuff. Thanks to Brian and Cindy both, to our presenting partners, Aquatera, CAPP, City of Grande Prairie, GP RIN, to our supporting partners, Community Features Grande Prairie and Region, County of Grande Prairie, MD of Greenview, and all of our and all of you for participating today. The next installment in our Community Pulse series will be on May 25th, featuring Kelly McTaggart from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Also upcoming are ribbon cuttings for Hearth Social Profit Company tomorrow, and Care in a Pinch on Friday, ribbon cutting for CMB Broker on the 26th, and our Business After 5 mixer also on the 26th, hosted by the Art Gallery of Grande Prairie. And of course, our Peace Region Energy Show goes next Wednesday and Thursday at Evergreen Park. I'd invite everybody to come out and check that out. Contact the Chamber office for more information, or visit our website, grandprairiechamber.com. Have a great rest of your day and week, and thanks again for everybody participating.